I'd say
talked to her.
Angelica, wouldn't you? Is that what you remember?
No, I remember living in Hilton.
Hilton, do you?
How
Yeah.
old were you when you were in Hilton?
In Hilton? Oh, I must have been about 7 or so.
So, let's see,
That old?
Owena, you're 2
What
years
grade-
younger?
what grade were you
Grandma
in?
and Grandpa Owen were there? No, they didn't.
No, they lived in Hemlock. They still had a Chevrolet business.
Wasn't Hilton, didn't Dad go to college from Hilton?
No.
I know
That
he
was
went to,
Hanover.
oh, Hanover, yeah.
So you remember Angelica, that's where you sort of,
Yeah, when
That's
I was first grade. Yeah, or kindergarten.
Yeah,
okay.
where were we, Dad? Oh, we were in Hanover. We had,
When we were in Hanover, Dad went to college with a wife, 2 kids, and $2 in his pocket.
11.
11 bucks? Mama told me too.
Wow.
That's all in his diary somewhere.
How
Is
did,
it?
how did
Oh, yeah.
he do
Oh,
that?
yeah?
Oh, that's-
They found a parish for him.
So
Survey.
he preached and studied at the same time.
Yeah.
That's how
Wow.
well,
amazing.
Now, did you have grandparents living with you at that point?
no.
No.
They were, they lived in Hemlock, right next to this garage. And well, there are pictures of it at home.
Yeah.
And you must remember that, don't you?
Oh, Grandpa owned the garage,
Yeah, sure.
and he
He had
was a pretty good business for a while.
He sold Chevrolets, and he had a mechanic named Cliff who did all the repair work out in the back, and had this little showroom with a little glass case with not much in it, and
Don't
a
remember
couple of
that.
spare mirrors and things like that for cars. And a gasoline pump that you cranked up by hand. So you pumped it up until things showed how much you pumped up, 5 gallons or so, and then you drained it off into a car.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Wow. Do you remember getting rides in the cars?
Well, they just they always had a car, yeah. That was,
Uh-huh.
They always had a Chevy, and we did too, for that matter.
I remember my mother most vividly.
Yeah.
Funny thing,
She
that,
was a vivid person, huh?
yeah,
So,
so what,
well, Mother was, she was always home, you know.
yeah,
None of this going to work and leaving your family alone. She was always there.
yeah.
Sometimes she was strict. Once in a while we got along, but not. After I got older, we didn't get along at all.
Like how old?
Oh, 16.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
They were very close in a way. They were very, I'm sure, genuinely fond of each other. Dad had very much wanted to marry her and so on. And I think she basically admired him for what he was. But of course we never had any money, and he was always shaky. Oh, because it was Depression times, you know,
Yeah.
there wasn't that much money around. And that colored everything. And Mother was very much an activist. She would have been a good real estate agent. She was a good salesman, and she dealt very easily with people, and she enjoyed mixing with people, you know. And she was, in fact, a very sociable person. We had people in for dinner all the time, and but she was opinionated, and she could alienate people sometimes. But on the whole, she was very personable, and she was a good bookkeeper and very careful. And I'm sure she was largely responsible for keeping us afloat, just because of attention to management.
mhm.
But Dad was too, but Mother took care of those details.
We don't have the security the day that we had then, when Mother was always home
No.
Yeah.
and the family was together at dinner and breakfast, lunch, and dinner within certain hours, and very.
Did you have to do chores and help around the house?
Yeah, we did dishes quite a lot, I remember.
Yeah, we used to do dishes, we used to sing when we were doing dishes
Yeah,
together.
What did you sing?
Well, just whatever came to your mind, some popular tune or
Popular
whatever.
tunes?
Yeah.
And, I helped mow lawns and things like that, just what you do, that's
Did you play cards?
Not with the parents, Mother used to have people in every Sunday night for a while,
yeah,
and they'd play
they play canasta with it or something like that.
rook or something, and she'd make waffles
Yeah,
for Sunday night supper.
yeah, no, we didn't,
But I don't remember them playing an awful lot of card games.
no,
Mother used to like to play bridge, and Dad used to try to play with her, but he didn't enjoy it too much.
it wasn't his bag,
And she was, as her usual sweet self, saying,
Yeah. Bridge is for people who like to count in their heads all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, no, they got on pretty well, Mother always needed somebody to blame, that was I think the one characteristic I remember is that, whatever matter came up for discussion, it would sooner or later turn into a little sermon, of why didn't you do this, or why didn't this happen, all that sort of thing. And it was, she had to find somebody to blame and make a little sermon out of it.
I used to spit back at Mother once in a while.
Mhm.
What happened then? I mean, once you did that, what would happen?
She'd answer or ignore it, I don't remember.
Mhm.
I could get a nasty dig in now and again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, later in life it was less pleasant because Mother would get carried away on these things. Remember, one time they were, what was it? Dad hadn't done something, and she was concerned about money and all that. And she would get into these things and get sort of hysterical. I remember she was screaming at him, that you didn't do this, you didn't do that, that you just half lived, and all this kind of stuff. And fortunately, that wasn't the norm, but it could happen that way sometimes. And you just learn to try to avoid the circumstances that would trigger this kind of hyper response.
Yeah.
And we got along,
Was anyone else in her family like that? Her parents?
I don't think so. Her mother, she complained that her mother was very strict, but because the time we knew her, her mother was already 80-something, and all that had long since passed by.
Yeah.
So you tend to remember the more dramatic things sometimes.
Yeah. Right. That's interesting.
And so I sort of lived my own life. I had these kids I knew in Hilton. I can't remember who they were. Angelica. A few. Mostly in Greenwich. See, we moved from Angelica to Greenwich. No, we moved from Angelica to Troy. Oops, I got it wrong. We moved from Angelica, and then we lived in Troy. And Dad got a job as director of religious education for the Troy Conference of the Methodist Church. And that lasted about 4 years, and they ran out of money. And I have all this correspondence that Mother filed away. This letter from the, I guess he's, what do you call him? Not the bishop's superintendent, something. This very sugary letter written to Mother about how much they all admired what Dad had done and this sort of thing. as the, you know, the kiss of death letter that you always.
Yeah.
And so the money ran out. And so they secured in this little parish in Greenwich, where we lived for, a couple of years, maybe a little more. Anyway, I went from being a freshman in Troy High School to, I guess, freshman or sophomore in Greenwich High School. And then I was in Greenwich one way or another until I graduated.
Yeah.
And it was from Greenwich that we moved to Portland. And then when I went to Lawrence Academy, we were living in Portland, and we were still there when I went to college. And I worked several summers in Portland while I was in school. And then I think it was in my senior year in college, wasn't it, when the money ran out in Portland too. And Dad got shuffled off this little parish in a really blue-collar working class area of Albany, Tenbrook Street. They were nice old dwellings dating from the days when Albany was primarily had been a Dutch colony, and some of that survived.
What was your favorite town, if you could, did you have a favorite town, because I think what's so different in your life from so many people's is how many places you lived.
Right. Yeah, where would you have liked to have lived longer? Either because of the town or the friends or.
If you look back and say, oh, this was really stood out.
Hard to say. There's a place where I had the longest stretch of what might be called normal life, I guess, would be Greenwich.
How about you, Owena?
But I remember walking up and down the streets in Greenwich, you know, just a teenager with no particular love life or nothing, not knowing just where I was going, and a warm summer night, and you know, you just had the feeling something ought to be happening. And it wasn't. Greenwich was just there, and I was stuck in this environment, and there was, you know, it wasn't very satisfying, and now I look back, Greenwich would not have been the place to stay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like Portland best.
Yeah, I guess I did too. Because I didn't see so much of Portland.
Yeah.
Right.
But I liked the environment in Portland. The beach was accessible. The waterfront was fascinating. I loved to bumble along the waterfront. Because it was, in those days, it was just a nice, crummy waterfront with a lot of activity. They had a ship line that went back and forth to New York. There was a place where they were building lobster boats, and you could just watch them build it, you know. There was a second-hand shop that had all kinds of old diving equipment and stuff like that in this window.
Yeah.
I just loved it down there.
Yeah, always fun.
Yeah.
It was happy days.
That I would happily live in Portland right now.
Yeah, so would I.
I would enjoy it a lot more than Lexington, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, small city or.
I know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's within easy reach.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I had a good time there. Mother sent us to dancing school. We had money, we went social.
Yeah. Lots of young folks in town, I suppose.
She sent us to dancing school in Troy.
Was it Troy?
Yep.
Troy. What sort of dancing was that? Like the foxtrot or?
Oh, we learned the foxtrot and waltz.
No, when
How
I
did
was
that-
16, I was going to high school, wasn't I? And
Yeah.
then I went out, I was working as a waitress summers.
That was
And-
later on, though.
Yeah.
And you were living where then?
Troy.
That was Troy when you started?
Graduated from Deering High School in Troy, and you were away at Lawrence Academy at that time, right?
Well, I went to Deering High School for 6 months.
Yeah.
We moved in January of '35. And I moved in the last semester of the senior year during high school. So I just did my thing, and then went back to Greenwich and took the Regents exams for high school. And then I taught I guess I read history by myself, and I hadn't had any math, so I hired a tutor who taught me logarithms. And then I went back to New York State and graduated with my class from Greenwich High School.
But I remember the time you were being tutored for logarithms, I was supposed to take home flashcards for math, and Mother was supposed to hold them up for me
Oh.
and help me learn them.
Uh-huh.
Never did it.
Uh-huh.
Dear God, the young son here got the tutor.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, is that-
Mother just didn't have the patience to do that.
I don't remember the flashcard business.
So Owena, what was it like living at home after he was out of the house at school?
Hmm. I was busy. I think I was dating at that time, wasn't I?
Could have been, yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't you have Big George? What was his name?
George
doc-
Cummings, the
The
doctor's
doctor's
son.
son, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. We dated a lot, and then George's mother thought we saw too much of each other, so she made him invite a different girl up to spring something or other at Bowdoin College. And I didn't like that very well.
Uh-uh.
But he very nicely, as I look back on it, arranged for one of his acquaintances to take me to the dance and date me.
Hmm.
So I wasn't left high and dry.
Oh,
And at the fraternity house, you know, the girls all slept on the second floor, and then they had the dorm and so on. Some of the girls were lying around downstairs. So I decided, well, I'm gonna lie down with this guy too. So I slept on the floor with him. And George went over to his room and scratched up my portraits, and that was the end of that.
Oh. Oh my gosh, yeah.
So we didn't
Well-
see too much of each other after that. But those were fun years, because they had a nice boat. Was it y'all, I guess?
Yeah.
Mm,
I remember we all went out on it one time.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds good.
wow,
Dear.
yeah.
What was it like growing up in a dry house with no alcohol? Was that a big deal?
No.
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 I don't think so. Nobody ever worried about that. It was just how things were.
Yeah.
Well, Mother implanted in us, you know, we would park somewhere one time, and a bunch of young men came up in the car next to us, and they were drinking beer. And it was disgusting, disgusting beer. So I decided that beer was a low-class drink. Yeah, but it's good on a hot
Poor
summer
man's
day.
champagne.
Exactly.
Once in a while.
So did that put you off of alcohol or just put you off of beer?
Oh, I just never attempted alcohol for years.
Yeah,
I just wasn't interested. I was,
yeah.
But-
How about smoking? Was that,
I was smoking when I was about 16, I think.
yeah. Was that looked down on or was that sort of accepted?
I didn't like it very well, but nothing much was said.
Yeah. So what happened after George Cummings took a hike? What was?
I went up to Westbrook Junior College,
Mm-hmm.
spent a couple of years there.
What was that like? Did you live in a dorm or
I lived in, yeah, they had houses, you know,
like? So
not
George-
dormitories, but they houses at that time. And I was in Houghton Hall, I guess they call it. And come to find out, there was another house where everybody lived who was working their way through. And I was supposed to be there. But Mother didn't like that, so she got me into Houghton Hall instead, where the nice girls
Uh-huh.
were.
Ah!
And I missed a lot of fun, I think. And I
see.
worked in the school cafeteria.
What was your job there? Did you do anything in
Just
particular?
opening the cafeteria and frying the hamburgers and stuff on rotation with another gal. And I got confused on our schedule a couple of times, and I thought she was working and I should have been. So the dean took me aside and said, well, if Mrs. whatever she is, who was the boss of that, calls you in, why don't you offer to work somewhere else? In other words, she fired me.
Uh-huh.
So wasn't there something else I can do? Because that was my only income, of course. Is, well, you can wait on a table in the dining hall. So I got switched.
Oh, I see.
My
Yeah.
nose is running.
Well, what about when you were younger, in Angelica years, how, were you little angels? Because did you ever get into trouble?
No, I don't.
I don't think so.
Never?
Wow.
No, it was a, we were, everything was contained in a small town environment in those days. You lived within a certain circle of friends because that's who was around. The towns had mostly populations of 3,000 to 5,000, maybe something like that, 6,000. And so you had your usual school friends. There were some class divisions about which we were only barely conscious. Where was it in Angelica? The Catholic Church was right around the corner from the Methodist Church, and I'm sure there was a Catholic community with which we had relatively little contact. And I know the grocery store was a block and a half away. The post office was right on the corner. The drugstore was run by the Remans, and that was just in the middle of the block. And that was how your life was contained. And if you just went out to play, and the day there was the woods and the creek, you just went out, and I forget who I played with, but we went off and just wandered up and down the creek and climbed the trees and just enjoyed
Outdoors?
rather rural, semi-rural life.
Did I go with you? I don't
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I don't remember that we.
You had just separate groups of friends?
Yeah.
What did you think of your older brother? Did you look up to him, or did you think he was a pest? Or?
Oh no, he was always kind of godlike. My big brother. I had a different set of, well, I remember I didn't have too many friends as a young girl. I liked Frances Jones. And I used to go to Frances Jones' house. And her mother had a leather-covered circular thing in the middle of the living room that she used to let us jump on. And my mother didn't particularly approve of Frances Jones's mother. And I suspect she was a prostitute.
Ah,
And Frances had the run of whatever she wanted to do.
Mm.
And so Mother forbade me to go to that house. And, so of course I kept on going.
yeah.
Last time, Mom ran out of patience. And she came to Frances Jones' house with a switch. And she chased me down through the middle of Angelica with the switch. And I never went there again.
Wow.
Oh,
Always
dear.
made the wrong friends. Oh,
Did you have to sneak out of the house to go to Francis
I
Jones'
just went.
house? Or
Yeah,
just
I
went?
just went.
Owena, you were in Westbrook, right? And
Westbrook Julia,
yeah. So what were you studying there? Did you have something you were
I
headed towards?
wanted to go and train to be a secretary,
Mhm.
but I was told that I must take liberal arts so I could go on to senior college. so I took liberal arts. And I was waitressing at LeMay's Tavern the last year I was there. And that's where I met Ken. He came in. And we started dating, and then he said, you should go on to senior college. He went up to the University of New Hampshire, and I used his address, and he screamed and hollered and got me in, transferred as a junior to UNH.
Wow.
And I worked for the state through him, and I waited on tables during the day for lunch, and I worked weekends waiting on tables. And Dad and Mother were screaming, come home, come home, come home. And that's when I decided, I don't want to go home. I don't want to, God bless my mother, I don't want to listen to any more complaining and oh dearing and
Yeah.
so on. So, I stayed there, and of course I flunked out. And I was a lousy student. In fact, I still have nightmares. I'm on the campus and I don't know which class I should go to or which building I should be in.
Right.
And so Ken says, well, you might as well get out before they throw you out. So I went back and settled into Hampton as a full-time waitress at LeMay's. Made very good money.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Mother and Dad were screaming, come home, come home, come home. No way.
Yeah.
My second year at Westbrook, that's when times got really rotten. And
Yeah.
then Ken was dodging the draft. So,
What, was he working at that time, or what?
yeah, he was working in the motor vehicle department, which he always stayed with. And so, we decided we should get married before they came and got him.
Yeah.
And,
Was that an excuse to stay out of the draft at that point? If you were married, or?
Oh, we intended to get married anyway, but that put a little emphasis on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting there thinking, I guess I'll get married, I don't know what else to do. No wonder the poor man had a terrible time. So I did.
And where did you live when you got married? What was your first?
I was married in Albany, New York, in a little chapel,
Mm-hmm.
and Dad married us in combination with another minister. And we had a place in Portsmouth called Panaway Manor, which were extra houses built to house the extra people who were working on the shipyard, because
Mm-hmm.
so many people came in to be employed during the war. And of course, they were only for shipyard workers, but somehow Ken managed to get one. So we rented that too long, and they caught up with him, and he had to go in the service. And he decided I'd move in with his parents, so his parents were sitting there. Here comes little Owena with all her stuff, moving in, living with him.
Oh,
How was that?
It was very pleasant.
really?
I mean, they were wonderful, marvelous people.
Mm-hmm. Had you always gotten along with them?
Yeah. Yeah, I was thoroughly spoiled, you know. They put up with it.
Wow.
And that lasted, Ken was in the service 6 months and 1 day. Then he got out and came home, and we bought the little house on Sagamore Avenue.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Paid $5,000 for it. Everybody was aghast. That was a horrible price for that little house. It was the only one in all of Portsmouth or Kittery that was for sale.
Really?
Wow.
It just flooded in with workers from the shipyard.
Wow.